My name is Lucy Candib. I'm speaking to Agenda Item 9V. I live in Ward 9, Precinct 5, and I hope Mr. Wally is listening. I've been a family physician in this community for more than 45 years. I've taken care of some of the poorest and most vulnerable in our city's population. What I understand about disasters and climate change is a worldwide disaster is that the most vulnerable are affected first and worst, as our previous speaker mentioned. The continent-wide drought in sub-Saharan Africa has resulted in the forced migration of millions. The excess heat in Central America has led to crop failure over and over, pushing migration northwards. New data shows that Central American farmers are now suffering from heat-related premature kidney damage. In Europe, thousands of elderly residents this past summer had to seek cooling centers to survive the infernal heat. 1,500 people died from heat this summer in France, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of animals that died because of failures of cooling systems for them. In Worcester, the bacteria are changing. We have blue algae closing swimming areas. The viruses are changing. We have extended mosquito spraying because of eastern equine encephalitis now affecting our community. As the heat rises, we will only see more of these changes. These are examples of how climate change has already affected and created emergency after emergency all around the world. Water rises in many places, Zika rises in others, EEE comes here, the heat extends, the insect vectors move, the diseases spread. It's not enough to just address today's problems. We need to take on the root causes. Worcester needs to recognize the climate crisis and make the changes in our strategies that will best help our citizens, all of them, to survive the disasters that will come. And they will come. Beyond global warming, climate change means unpredictable weather. Right now, our infrastructure barely manages to deal with one unpredictable weather event. Imagine multiple unpredictable disasters: forest fires, floods, droughts, hurricanes, tornadoes, each one leaving chaos, injury, homelessness, death in their wake. It's like seeing the same stuff in the newspaper over and over, but it's going to be here.
Can you wrap up your comments too, please?
Yeah. This doesn't even begin to address the trauma affecting people who go through these experiences. Think Katrina writ large, over and over, here. Among the most vulnerable, always the most vulnerable are the worst affected. 2/3 of those who died in France were actually over 75 from the heat. When the air quality worsens, people with chronic disease, heart disease, lung disease are the ones to succumb first. The poor are more likely affected by the fires, floods, and earthquakes, and they have the least resources.
Thank you very much.
Worcester has more than our share of our low-income people. We are the canaries in the coal mine.
Hi, thank you all for the opportunity to speak. My name is Gary DeRamos, and I live in Maine South. I'm a student at Clark University, and I'm one of the many people in Worcester who helped put this resolution together. I would like to especially thank Sarai Rivera for her allyship in this process. I want to share with you two things. First, my climate story, and then second, how this bill came to be. I'm originally from the Philippines, but I grew up in Hong Kong, New York, and now I'm happy to call Worcester my home. In the Philippines, we are hit with typhoon after typhoon every summer. Every summer, I am worried for the safety of my family. In Hong Kong, when I walk from the school to the bus stop, I look at the South China Sea, and it is literally red because the pollution from China has migrated down south into our waters. In New York City, I lived in Roosevelt Island, which is immediately on the East River. You are 7 feet above sea level, and I know for a fact in my lifetime that will be underwater. And in Worcester, as has been beautifully articulated by residents before me, we are seeing climate change occur here and now. Climate change is happening everywhere. It is happening around us and is impacting the most vulnerable residents of Worcester, which is why I would urge you all to pass the climate emergency resolution. A bit about this bill. As city councilors, it is your job to represent the will of the people. This bill is the will of the people. This bill was put together by dozens of climate organizations, nonprofits, immigrant groups, women's rights groups. It was a diverse number of community organizations with diverse interests have come together to express their support for this bill. Your job is to enact the will of the people. This is the will of the people, so please, I look forward to you passing this bill tonight. Thank you.
My name is Dana Cheyenne Harvey. I'm here to speak about item 9V. I live here in the county and I work at one of the local colleges. I'm very active in the community. I'm on 6 county boards. Most of my research and the reason that I'm here today is on climate change, disasters, environmental justice, and environmental racism. With the few minutes I have today, I want to talk a bit about Hurricane Katrina. I realize that Katrina might seem to be a bit of a stretch for issues facing Worcester, but most residents there, particularly in the long-term aftermath, interpreted Katrina not so much as a disaster, but as a product of climate change or as a failure of local governance. So I briefly just wanted to talk about some of the demographic similarities between Worcester and New Orleans. Most people across the U.S. wondered why the city didn't have a plan. It did have a plan. In fact, the city had simulated a Category 5 hurricane just a year before. The problem was the plan was not inclusive. Many of you probably remember watching Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans on television and wondering why people didn't leave New Orleans. 27% of households in New Orleans did not own a car. This was compounded by the fact that many of those who did not own cars didn't want to leave relatives, especially the elderly or the infirm. So oftentimes the entire family stayed behind. 20% of households in Worcester also don't have access to a car, so not a large difference. Many were also trapped in the city because they were underemployed or looking for work and relied on governmental assistance. Many of the people I interviewed with and worked with in New Orleans consistently said, please explain to people that Katrina hit at the end of the month, right when most people had run out of money and were waiting the following week to receive a check to help pay for groceries or to help pay for rent. In New Orleans, when Katrina hit, 26% of the residents lived in poverty. Again, not much different than Worcester. Furthermore, the lack of recovery in parts of New Orleans bear lessons as well. As the Telegram reported last year, Worcester had one of the biggest increases in its concentrated poverty rate from 2010 to 2016 among all metropolitan regions in the country. It's still quite below the national average, but I believe it was ranked 16th or 17th for terms of increase. If you want to know which areas of New Orleans did not recover after Hurricane Katrina, you simply need to only look at areas of concentrated poverty. New Orleans had a plan. It just wasn't for everyone. I can give many other similarities, but my time is probably up, so I thank you for listening, and I'm more than happy to speak with anyone about moving this forward.
Thank you.